Night school. So 60-second context on the audience purpose of the episode. The book that we're covering is the Kybalion. It is a modern summary, modern as in 110 years ago or so, summary of the natural laws according to the philosophy of ancient Egypt. And the angle that I'm coming at it is I want to present meditations for experiencing each of the principles rather than allowing them to remain intellectual, because they are to be integrated and embodied rather than just thought about. And then I'm exploring it from a Christian perspective in the sense that I'm exploring how the principles can result in one attaining a state of consciousness that is more like the state of consciousness demonstrated by Jesus.
Awesome. That sounds really interesting.
So a law is a code expressed in language that, if honored, aligns one with reality. There are fundamental laws, and then those fundamental laws are extrapolated out into more specific laws. So in the Bible, you've got early on the 10 commandments in Genesis, and then by Leviticus, you have like hundreds of codes that are extrapolations of those fundamental laws. And so there's very broad laws, and there are very specific laws you could call like codes, and what's another law-y word like that?
Yeah,
regulations. Yeah. So in American law, there's the same thing. There's the Constitution that lays out the general framework of the law and the Bill of Rights. And then every time we create little codes and regulations, we have to figure out how they are coherent branches off of those original laws.
Yeah.
And those original laws were based on the understanding that the founding fathers had of natural law. And that's not totally irrelevant to this discussion on the Kybalion, because many of the founding fathers were Freemasons, and the Freemasons held in high regard Egyptian philosophy. So even American law could be an indirect extension of the principles expressed in the Kybalion.
Interesting.
When they say we hold certain truths to be self-evident, they're saying we assume that these laws are based on natural laws or extrapolations of natural laws, because when we live and think and breathe these laws, life works way better, and we become conduits of freedom and goodness and truth and beauty. So of course these are true, because they result in goodness and truth and beauty. So there's, and one more thing I want to say about law itself is that there are natural laws and there are human laws. So I don't want to create a comparison, for example, between the laws expressed in the Kybalion and the 10 Commandments, because they serve different purposes and they're both useful. The 10 Commandments are the rules that, if followed directly by human beings in conduct, result in greater alignment with reality or God. And the Kybalion presents principles that all of nature is subject to. So you can't say to a tree, don't commit adultery. Like, that's a human extrapolation of a natural law. But everything in nature is subject to the laws in the Kybalion, or at least that's the premise of the Kybalion. So another thing that's good introductory information for the episode is I'm going to make a lot of references to the heart. And so I want to clarify what I mean by that and offer some resources for people who want to be a lot more specific about what I mean by heart.
Great. Yeah, I'd love that.
So the modern medical system is operating on a paradigm that's based on physics principles that are about a century old. And there is a book called Vibrational Medicine by Dr. Gerber. I can't remember the first name right now, but Dr. Gerber.
Okay.
He's an MD, and he makes that argument, and then he explains that the future of medicine is based on the physics principles revealed by Albert Einstein and later thinkers. So quantum physics, quantum field theory, those later developments in physics, if applied to the way that we think about our physiology, result in a much more useful and subtle understanding of what a human body is. So a human body is not a billiards ball game of particles bouncing around and arbitrarily interacting in certain ways. It's that on a certain gross level, but on a subtler level, the body is made of vibrational fields that are affected not just by other matter, but also by things like thought and intention. And one of the subtler levels of the body, subtler than what we call the physical body, is instead of, you could say the equivalent of the bloodstream for this subtler level of the body I'm referring to is the meridians. these channels that carry electrical impulses or energy. Read the book if you want to really get into this, because I'm not Dr. Gerber.
And can I clarify, when you say subtler, you're meaning just like, is it like less physical? Would that be a good way to put that? Less physical, or like energetic versus made of matter?
Well, I'll answer using the Kybalion. So the second principle is the principle of vibration, which states that anything that isn't God himself is vibrating at a certain rate. Mm-hmm. Well, when something vibrates at a very rapid frequency, you could call that a high vibration. That creates manifestations that are subtler, that are finer. Slower vibrations or lower vibrations are grosser. Gross as in the opposite of subtle, not gross as in synonym of disgusting.
Interesting. Yeah, gross as in like massive, and subtle as in like fine and detailed. I've never thought about it in that way, like in terms of wavelengths. Like that. Yeah. That's really interesting. Cool.
Yeah. So gross methods of healing are things like drugs and surgery. If you get an MD today, that's what they're teaching you. They teach you all the basic chemistry and biology and all of that, and then they teach you drugs and surgery.
Yeah.
You go to get a chiropractic doctorate, you're going to get all the basic biology and chemistry, but when everybody else branches off into drugs and surgery, you branch off into understanding that the way that the skeletal system of the body is aligned affects how energy on a subtler level flows through the body. And that's how you heal people. You branch off into being a naturopathic doctor, and you're learning about how the meridians can be affected via acupuncture, and you're learning about herbs and their healing potential and all sorts of other things. Mm-hmm. So NDs and chiropractic doctors operate at a subtler level of the physiology than medical doctors. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm saying that is just to say...
chiropractors do become doctors, right? I've heard people say otherwise, that chiropractors are like fake and not doctors. They are doctors?
They don't, like, they get the same, I want to say, like, after undergrad, you go into medical school. I think for those first 2 years, they're all taking the same classes. The MDs and the chiropractors and the naturopaths all have to take basic biology and chemistry and get an understanding of what we would call in this discussion the gross level of the physiology.
Gotcha.
They all have to have those basics. So then the MDs say, well, what do we do with this information, with these basics? Well, we need to figure out the right surgeries and the right drugs to mitigate symptoms so that people suffer less. And the chiropractors go in a different direction and go, what are we going to do with this information? Well, we need to figure out how to realign the skeletal structure of a human being so that energy can flow through it in a manner that results in healing. So chiropractic work is more predicated on the existence of God in a sense than medical work, because they believe that if the human body is aligned correctly, it will heal. Like, it's not that they're healing the person. It's the chiropractor at, I can't remember the name right now. His name's Dr. Dane, and he's on Road 68. Mm-hmm. So if anyone wanted to check him out, they could get it off that in Pasco, Washington. But when he cracks you, he says, power's on. As in saying, I have realigned your body in a way that lets the energy flow through you better.
Right.
And that
like he's connected the circuit now.
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
Some of the pictures on the wall refer to chiropractic work as the investigation and repair of the fuse box of the nervous system. It's like, oh, it's just a fuse out. It's not that you need to go in there and repair the car manually. That has its place. But he calls... I can't remember exactly the way that he worded it, but I went to a presentation that Dr. Dane put on, and he called the medical system like sickness care, not health care, or disease care, not health care, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's about, sometimes you do just need to replace the fuel pump in the car. Sometimes it's not a fuse. Sometimes you do need to go in with surgery because things have gotten to a certain level. But the only reason I brought up that whole subject is just to say that the gross level of the physiology that the Western mind is used to is based on Newtonian physics, not even based on Einsteinian physics, let alone based on later developments that just make everything in the universe unbelievably bizarre. And I only said that to make the point that there is a level of the human physiology subtler than what we call physical, where rather than having a bloodstream, we have meridians that carry either electrical impulses or energy. That's over my head, around the body. That's the level that is addressed by things like Kundalini yoga, that or even chiropractic opens that. Acupuncture addresses that. Chi, life force, lifetrons, as Paramahansa calls them, travel through this level of the body. And in this level of the body, there are energy centers that such energy travels through that can be open or blocked. One of which is, and those are called chakras. And chakras are not patented by India. Chakras were acknowledged by ancient Hebrews.
Chakra is just the Indian word for it, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. And such energy centers are alluded to all over the book of Revelations. And so that's a whole nother field of research I'm not going into. But I'm just mentioning that because I don't want to say heart all over this episode without addressing what the hell I even mean by that. I'm not talking about the gross heart, the physical heart that pumps blood. I'm talking about the subtle energy heart that is located in the center of the chest and above where what we would call the physical heart is located. So that's what I mean in the meditations. And when I talk about what the heart chakra means to the ancient Semitics, the Hebrews and the ancient Christians, and what the heart chakra means to yogis, that's the heart that I'm talking about. That subtle heart that deals with life force, energy, hai in Jesus's language, prana, pneuma. There's a million words for this life force energy. It deals with that rather than blood. So that being said, the first principle of the Kybalion is the principle of all. It is a straightforward allusion to, but not trying to be a description of, God. And one of the things that's said in this book, I'm not going to go into who wrote the book, but you can do that on research if you want. I'm just going to say he.
Okay.
It's written under a pseudonym. But he describes a story where Hermes, the ancient, you know what? That's worth part of the introduction too. It is the summary of the philosophy of Hermes. Hermes Trismegistus, I think is how it's pronounced, or Hermes thrice great, the most revered sage of ancient Egypt, according to legend. And a similar figure appeared in Greek philosophy, Hermes and Thoth in Egypt, and they were merged into one figure because they represented the exact same thing. That figure coined an ancient form of psychology that was something like transpersonal psychology, or the psychology not just of moods and states, but also psychic perception and things like that, astrology, and alchemy, which later developed into chemistry. Astrology later developed into astronomy. Alchemy later developed into chemistry, and this archaic form of psychology that took subtler realms into account developed into psychology. So not that they evolved necessarily, but we got those from that.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, there's a conversation where Hermes, this ancient great sage, is talking to students, and they're talking about the all principle. And they ask him why the all created the universe, and he just purses his lips shut. So even Hermes wanted to leave room between understanding and principle itself, the all itself. But there's a Hermetic axiom: the lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. So there's a chance that even his closest disciples couldn't conceptualize the answer even if he gave it to him. Or it's possible that you just can't put an answer like that into words. So,
or this is a wild speculative thing, but maybe he was saying it without his mouth and nobody could hear it.
That crossed my mind too.
Yeah.
Because that sort of thing might be sayable by an image of some kind, an image that you couldn't quite translate.
Yeah. Just a psychic communication. Like, imagine this atom. Like, I can't describe it to you in words, but imagine an atom that looks like this. And if you look at it, it'll just all make sense, and you'll just be weeping at God's reason or whatever.
Right.
But that's wildly speculative.
Maybe. I don't think it is wildly speculative. I also thought that there was a chance that rather than answer the question with words or ideas, he filled the room with a certain energy in response. That was something that I imagined happening in that conversation too. And so, yeah, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
But the principle, this just a fun fact that I like is that this all principle that, no, I'll also say that according to this first law in the Kybalion, that the all exists. That's the first law. What it says is that the all is in all, and all is in the all. So the all is in all, and all is in the all. The original cause, as it will be referred to later, appears in everything that exists. Like the example that he gives is Shakespeare, assuming that Shakespeare really was the author that wrote all of the stuff that he wrote, because there's speculation on that.
Sure.
But when Shakespeare writes Hamlet, Shakespeare is in Hamlet. Like the character and spirit of Shakespeare the man is represented as Shakespeare's creation, Hamlet.
Okay.
Hamlet can say, I'm Shakespeare, in the sense that he is made by Shakespeare. But if he says, I am Shakespeare, as in he's equal to Shakespeare, he's clearly confused because there's so many other things that have the essence of Shakespeare in it.
Sure.
Shakespeare can confidently say, I am Hamlet, like that came from me. That was something that existed in my psyche and my imagination that I then generated. Because the way that the Hermetics or the Kybalion followers think about the process of the all creating is that the all thinks that the universe is mental. So the all thinks everything into existence. Interestingly, the word that they use rather than think is meditate. The all meditates the universe into existence, which might make sense. Like if meditation is the direct perception of allness, then when the all creates the universe, the all creates the whole universe at the same instant. So in our human imagination, we would think, well, when I write a song and then make a painting and then write a book, I created 3 different things at 3 different times. And then we sit down, we close our eyes, and if we're experienced and humble and released enough to do so, we experience pure consciousness in meditation. We say, that's meditating, right? Then we come out of the meditation, we make 3 things at 3 times. We say, I made 3 things at 3 times. Then we go meditate, we go, oh, I saw everything. That's meditating. Well, when the all creates, the all doesn't create a bunch of different things at a bunch of different times. The all creates everything in the same eternal moment, the same eternal instant. So there's no differentiation between the all meditating and the all creating. You see what I mean by that?
Yeah. The way I'm kind of imagining this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that I'm thinking of it like God is, because I think of meditation as kind of like listening, like turning off your thinking so that you can listen to God, to listen to all. And so when you say that, it makes me think that God is asking, what if everything? And then stopping to listen to what if everything? Like he's asking a question and all is the answer to the question. And he's just sitting back and listening to what happens if everything. Does that make any sense? Does that vibe with what you're saying?
It, somewhat. I think there's something about it that I don't think vibes with what I'm saying, if I'm hearing it correctly, which is that that it's common in our culture to think of prayer as speaking out to God and meditating as listening to God.
Yeah.
But both of those presuppose a fundamental separation that makes the state of meditation impossible.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, like it implies that we have to call him and he has to pick up when like we're actually completely connected always.
Yeah, and even though I think what I'm saying is possible even if we're not completely connected always, because there's and I'll make this point using another principle from the Kybalion, which is the principle of correspondence, and this is the third principle. So we've already mentioned vibration, which is the second. The all is in all, which is the first. Now, the third is this correspondence. And the correspondence law is that every plane or dimension of existence reflects the nature of all others. So there's This is what's symbolized by the old Russian dolls. That they're the microcosm within macrocosm within macrocosm within macrocosm. I wish that there was 7 words between microcosm and macrocosm so I can make that point better. You know what I mean?
There definitely
There's
is.
a microcosm and a macrocosm and a macrocosm and a microcosm and then a, like if I wish
if
I
you
could
looked
just,
up the system, the metric system, though, there is probably. There probably
Really?
is there's probably 20 prefixes that would fit along that, like milli and kilo.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So imagine that I was educated enough to do that.
Cool. That's very good.
Thank you. I know. I really did my homework here.
Yeah.
So every dimension or level of reality reflects the nature of every other dimension or level of reality. And that truth is expressed in a statement like man is made in the image of God. Not meaning that God is like man, but meaning that the fundamental pattern of creation appears everywhere, and God is what defines that fundamental pattern of creation, and it exists in us as well. And it's useful for us to realize that because A, we realize that it's possible for us to attune to the divine, and B, we realize that even if we attune to the divine, we are still only a shard of it. Even if we're a perfect shard of it, we're still a shard of it. So there are spiritual teachers who will say things like, we are already always completely connected to God. And that, in my opinion, is an example of the confusion of levels, the confusion of planes. So, because you talked about this the other day, you were contemplating whether there's really a such thing as good and evil because everything is everything. And then you came to the conclusion that because you exist in a plane of reality that it's self-evident is disconnected from the absolute plane that you theorize to be God. At your level, there is a such thing as good and evil, even if in an absolute sense there isn't.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
And so similarly, I would say we are not completely connected to God all the time, but if we in prayer / meditation attune ourselves to the divine to the extent that we experience pure consciousness, not even consciousness as opposed to unconsciousness, but just we experience pureness, just invisible word and then ness as a suffix. If we experience that in meditation and we, as Uncle Iroh says in Avatar, eaten of the fruit and tasted its mysteries, can't describe those mysteries. We can eat of that fruit and taste those mysteries. If we do that, then for that moment, we're attuned to the divine. And then we try to draw that out in our daily life. And it takes practice going between meditating and doing our daily life to really be able to live out our life in a way that is attuned to the divine. So all that to say, in that moment, when we're in that deep transcendental state, we are not listening to or speaking out to the divine. We are experiencing the divine, not in a dualistic way. And yet still, we are not always completely connected to God. Sorry, that's kind of a long-winded answer to that. But at least I brought in another principle, so it wasn't all waste.
Yeah.
So the first method that I want to share for tuning oneself to the heart is an intoning. So it's making a certain sound that resonates in the chest cavity, and then following that sound, the feeling of it resonating in the chest cavity helps you bring your awareness to that point. And then the more you draw your awareness to that point, the more you experience your heart. And what this has to do with the all, since this is the first meditation and it corresponds to the first law from the Kybalion, is that the sound is associated with the divine in numerous languages. So Allah in Arabic, in Sanskrit even you have Brahma. So those are the only vowels in the sound. In Hebrew, Hebrew is complicated because the letters Aleph and Ayin in the Hebrew alphabet have that sound. Aleph is more like ah, and Ayin is more like the divine sound.
Okay.
And the Ayin, which is like later in the Hebrew alphabet, it's more of that guttural sound, and it's symbolized by an I. So there's something very mystical and Egyptian about it. The Aleph at the beginning is the ah, and then the Ayin is the It's a slightly more guttural sound that resonates right in the heart center, and they symbolize it by the I. So there's some kind of mystical allusion there, a illusion, not I illusion.
Yeah.
To the idea that to live the godly life is to see with the heart. And then the language that Jesus spoke, Aramaic, the word that he personally used for God, the word that came out of his mouth that's translated God in the Bible is Allah. So it's literally just the sound 3 times separated by 2 consonants. And those consonants, Lamed and Hey, Lamed represents a line extending out to infinity, and Hey represents breath or life. And so it's just extending out to infinity, life breath, That's the word that Yeshua used for God. So I thought there might be one other language that I'm missing, but whatever. I don't remember.
It feels like there's more examples. Like I'm trying to come up with another one too, but I don't know.
Yeah. So, I remember the other thing I wanted to say was just that it's cute to me that the word Allah in English means the realization of oneness. All, aha. And at an unconscious level, we associate certain sounds with certain feelings. There's a such thing as somebody looking like a Chad or a Brian, and it's because of the way that those sounds resonate to you. You could say, it's because of other people I've associated with that. But in the collective consciousness, we've stored the idea that sounds refer to natural phenomena.
I agree. I think there is something to that. Like someone seems like a something. Like someone can have a right name or a wrong name.
Right.
That feels true to me.
Yeah. And that's how ancient languages are formulated. And we did another episode called Using Visualization to Experience the Lord's Prayer, and I talked a little bit more about how that works. And there's a great book, Desert Wisdom, by Neil Douglas Klotz, that goes into that too. So that's another subject, but just on the sound. I want you to make an sound that, and you'll notice if you go like this, it kind of resonates up here.
Do it now?
Yeah. And then if you drop it, you can feel it resonating lower and lower towards your chest cavity.
Yeah, I do feel it lower. Yeah.
And now push out with your diaphragm so you just get a little more power in it, and you can feel it like your diaphragm is the muscle in your stomach that actually operates your lungs. And so if you push from here, you can get more power and you can feel it a little better. Now, tilt your head up a little bit and like relax your jaw like an idiot and let the tension out of your neck and your jaw, and it'll be more like this. It's like a guppy fish face. Right there. That guttural vowel, that is the sound that resonates in the chest cavity. Does that make sense? Can you feel that?
Yes. Yeah, I do feel it there.
Yeah. So that's the first practice. Move the microphone away from you so that you can feel a little more comfortable doing it, not into a freaking microphone. I turned my phone off. Do you have a timer handy?
Yeah.
I'm not going to make you chant the whole time. Don't worry. You just use that to find your focal point. Thank you. So the point is to notice with direct somatic experience, somatic meaning connection with your body. Notice by direct somatic experience why that guttural sound is associated with that all.
Say that one more time.
Notice why that guttural sound. No, I'm glad you asked for clarification, because what I meant to say was the direct experience of the heart chakra allows for the direct perception of pure consciousness or allness, which is why that guttural sound is associated with God names in multiple ancient languages. And you can hear that intellectually and go, yeah, maybe. But it's only by making that sound, feeling where it resonates, and then bringing your full awareness. This isn't something that we're going to accomplish in a couple minutes here in the 3 minutes that we're going to do it. It's something that you'd have to spend time doing. But it's something to try for like a few weeks. If you make that sound, notice where it resonates, and then bring your full awareness to that point. Relax the rest of your body and allow all your awareness to be concentrated right where that guttural sound is located, the heart chakra. You'll have a mystical experience that teaches you from direct knowing why that sound is associated with the heart chakra and why the experience of the heart chakra is associated with the realization of God.
Okay.
Does that make sense in theory?
It makes sense in theory.
Great.
Okay.
Great. So we're going to try it for 3 minutes just so that you have like an iteration of this under your belt. Oh, I actually did 3 hours. Does that work for you?
That should be fine. So the idea is then I just do it until I'm out of breath, and then I breathe. Like I just breathe, do it till I'm out of breath, breathe, do it till I'm out of breath. Yeah.
Don't do it till you're out of breath. Just do it until you've got the point. You only have to do it for a second.
Oh,
and then
okay.
if you completely lose the point, just do it for another second, just to put your sights back on that point.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
there it is. You bring your awareness there. And then you get completely lost. You're like, I'm literally just thinking about the idea of my chest. Then make the noise again. 3 minutes. One thing that's always good coming out of a heart-centering meditation is to come out of it by imagining that a green point from your chest expands out to be a green circle that then draws your awareness outward. So as you get more comfortable accessing that point in the chest, that visualization, move your mic back. That visualization that there's a green dot in the chest and then the dot expands out to not a circle, sorry, but a sphere, 360 degrees, expanding out from your body and then pushing outwards, can have really positive effects on your state because you're inviting the heart energy in you to expand out and surround you. So it's good for your health. It's good for protection. It's good for being a better presence to everybody around you. And it helps bring you out of the meditation. Because sometimes if you successfully dive deep within yourself and then you just open your eyes and come out, you can feel kind of groggy and weird.
Sure.
But that visualization and that feeling can help you come out of it in a more smooth way too.
Cool. I like that. Yeah.
So, second principle, vibration. They each... Oh, my bad. I was wrong. The second principle is correspondence. So, we've already touched on the principle of correspondence. I want to share something interesting about how the ancient Semitics thought about the heart center and what that means for this Kybalion principle of correspondence. The Kybalion, first of all, goes into a lot of different planes of reality or dimensions that exist according to the ancient Hermetic philosophers, the philosophers of this tradition. So they say, there's, just like the shamans say, there's an underworld and the middle world and the overworld. Those are three planes or three corresponding planes.
Yeah.
The Hermetics went all out and they have those three worlds and 7 in each. And then each of those 7 has another 7. So they describe all of these branches of reality, and they had some very advanced concepts of subtler particles and forces that do correspond to later realizations made by physics. So read the Kybalion yourself if you want to read some of those examples.
Interesting.
And they also present an example of a modern English philosopher of science who's the reincarnation of a yogi, and before that, an Egyptian. So that's pretty interesting. You could get his name and you could read his books if you're interested in that.
Cool.
So good reasons to read it yourself. 2 of the planes, the corresponding planes that are core to the ancient Semitic worldview, and by Semitic, I'm talking about the ancient Hebrews, which is the soil out of which ancient Christianity sprouted. They thought of the human being as an individual soul who is embedded in what you could call, to use a Native American term, the great soul, the universal spirit. The individual soul, they called the nafsha. This is Aramaic. It's nefs in Arabic and nefesh in Hebrew, because those are all Semitic languages, so they're related.
Okay.
But we're using Aramaic because that's the ones that I know most, because I like studying the words that Jesus said. Nafsha is individual soul. Ruha is the world soul, the universal soul. And the way that they thought about the connecting link, the relation, the bridge between the individual and the cosmic soul, was that it was in the heart. So the heart is the part of us that understands intuitively what it means to be both individual and cosmic. So the heart, which they called the leba, the L-E-B-A, the nafsha and the ruha are linked by the leba. And that is fundamental to their understanding of the world. When Yeshua is quoted saying, I am this, I am the good shepherd, I am the vine, I am the door, all of those statements, they sound in the English Bibles like grandiose bragging statements, like I'm telling you about my authority. But he didn't really tell about his authority. He more demonstrated his authority and let people speak for themselves. That wasn't his style. When he said things like that, the Aramaic word that he was using, according to the Syriac tradition, is inanna. And ina means I, and na means I also. So inanna is like I. Like the Rastafarians say I and I. That's what he's talking about. I, the nafsha embedded in the ruha. So he's saying I, an individual fully integrated with what is cosmic. That is a statement about his divinity, sure. But it's not the I'm divine and nobody else will ever be.
Right,
it's
not exclusively.
Yeah, it's not that kind of bunk. And that's not to say that he didn't have a divinity that's untouchable by anybody else. I'm not making that claim. That's a complicated issue. But I'm just saying that he wasn't the type to say, I'm the king, I'm the Lord, I'm the, I am this, I am that as a brag. He was just saying when a human being is fully integrated with what's universal, it's this. So, Inana Nure da Alma, I am the light of the world. What he's saying is when a human being is fully integrated with the universal and that oneness is demonstrated and lived out, they are the embodiment of the consciousness that manifests as and illuminates all the myriad forms of the universe. He's saying something very Bhagavad Gita, where they talk about there's the supreme being, and out of the supreme being manifests all of the forms that make up the whole. What's that word for like the whole complete supersymmetrical array? I'll just say that the whole complete supersymmetrical array, of everythingness.
Yeah.
He's saying something like that, not making a claim about whether his divinity was unique or not. That's a subtle question that we can't touch here. But those are two planes of correspondence, the nafsha and the ruha. Their natures are like in some way, and the leba is what connects them. So this next heart meditation is a visualization.
Please. To go back a little bit. So what were the three planes that you were referencing then again? The three planes or the two planes that they said were very important. That's the ruha and the nafsha. They refer to those as planes?
They don't refer to them as planes.
Okay.
They just, I don't know. Okay. I'm not back there. And the books that I'm citing are Revelations of the Aramaic Jesus and, I think just that one actually by Neil Douglas Klotz.
Okay.
So, that's the book that I'm citing. They are planes. I'm not guaranteeing that they thought of them exactly like that, but they certainly understood, because here's an example. They had this concept of hakima, which is chokmah in Hebrew or Sophia in Greek, wisdom, holy wisdom. Mm-hmm. Holy wisdom was the God principle. So this is an aspect of the all, a function of the all. It is what balances, harmonizes, and organizes diversity around unity. So based on that being a part of their cosmology, their worldview, we know that they had an understanding that there's something universal. Mm-hmm. That universal thing is reflected in everyone, but everyone is a shard, a piece, a particle, a particular vibration of that total thing. Mm-hmm. We know that they understood that. Therefore, we know that they understood that a human being reflects the nature of the divine in a limited way, that finite creations reflect the infinite finitely. We know that they thought that. Mm-hmm. And that does fall under the category that the Hermetic philosophers describe as planes. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. I think of planes as a place, as something against which things can happen, like a backdrop against which things could happen. But it does make sense that a soul is, in a sense, that kind of thing, that we do have like an internal world of our soul sort of thing.
I think that I think that the word dimension, well, the word dimension has a different connotation too. The word plane and the word dimension have certain connotations mm-hmm. that limit them in a way that prevents a clear understanding of the Hermetic principle. And I think that's tripping you up a little bit.
Maybe.
Because we think of plane as something like...
in a D&D context. In D&D, it is like a dimension. It's like a world, and there are several different planes of existence that overlap with each other. And
right.
There's sort of worlds that can overlap with each other, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So then just extend that... I'll use a Ken Wilber concept mm-hmm. that I think makes this more palatable to people of our culture, because that's what Ken Wilber was all about.
Okay.
And he was certainly familiar with the Kybalion based on a lot of things that he wrote. So Ken Wilber was a transpersonal, integrative, developmental psychologist, meaning that he was interested in higher states of consciousness considered abnormal by the mainstream paradigm. And he was interested in how things develop, and he understood the all. He was interested in how things develop from the all to small, teeny tiny things, to more and more complex things, and eventually back into the all. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons we know he was into the Kybalion is that in his one of his landmark works, which was called The Spectrum of Consciousness, he refers to involution and evolution. So things fall from allness into diversity, and things grow from diversity back into allness. And it's like a bike pedaling. Both are happening involution and evolution.
Okay.
Like when we were in a psychedelic experience, and one time you said that you realized that everything was falling, and you were very amused by that realization. And I think part of the reason was we know that everything is growing because we constantly push that paradigm, but you were noticing that everything is also falling. It's like you were experiencing involution.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking about, in that sense, like not just about life, but also about the expansion and contraction of the universe and the suns and the black holes, and how there's like a constant dance of push and pull happening like at the same time. And It's really interesting to think about that. Like, I haven't really thought about that as like with life as well, but that does make sense to me, that like we would just get to a point where we'd get so diversified that we're like, this doesn't make what we got to go back. Like, it makes sense that there would be sort of that push and pull of like creation, and then let's wrap this up, and then let's do that again.
And that is the case. And it's not just that unity expresses itself out in diversity, but eventually things are so diversified that they end up having everything in common and they're unity again. It's not just that on that finite time scale where it's unity, then diversity, then unity. It's also that involution and evolution are both occurring at the same time always. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so since Ken Wilber, the Spectrum of Consciousness, one of his landmark works, which is basically about the Kybalion principle of vibration, that everything develops in that way, that he refers to the universe as the spectrum of consciousness. So consciousness vibrating at all of the various rates. The 2 chapters of that book are involution and evolution. And that's from the Kybalion. Maybe not only from the Kybalion, but
yeah.
So we know that he was down with this book almost certainly. He created a concept called holons. A holon is any unit of reality. And his point was that we live in a universe that is units within units within units within units, and that exists as an endless... What do you call it when like the same pattern repeats in something? Fractals. Yeah.
Okay.
In an endless sea of fractals of units of reality, and each of them reflects the whole in a complete way, even though it's a limited spark of reality. So that concept, Ken Wilber's concept of the holons, that's a better way for someone of our culture and time to grasp what the Kybalion really meant by planes of correspondence. The endless holon. Some of the levels that it talks about is like mineral consciousness to insect consciousness to animal consciousness to human consciousness to all of the various beings that operate on levels we can't conceptualize. Talking about that whole scale. So I think that holon concept prevents the mind from going to something like a place or a dimension or like the story of a house, you know? Yeah.
Bless you.
So when you think of the planes as holons, I think then it's a little more graspable that one of the ways that you could describe a map of reality is the holon of the individual soul, and then the ultimate holon of the universal soul. And there being some relation between the universal and the individual soul. And for the ancient Semitic, that link, that relation was the heart.
Okay.
So are you down with all that? Do you have any other comments or questions?
No, I'm good. Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, there's a visualization that can support the awareness of what the ancient Semitics meant by the heart being this link. Basically, we're going to consider the heart to be the belly button of our connection with God. So we're going to visualize that the universe is one massive sphere made of white light, and that you are a human-shaped thing, human-shaped white light, right in the center, super teeny, tiny, right in the center of that great sphere.
Okay.
Sitting exactly the way that you're sitting right now.
Okay.
And then visualize that sphere has like donut cone shaped, this is kind of hard to describe, like donut cone shaped energy portals moving into the front and back of your chest.
Like
and that
tendrils
when you
reaching from the outside of the ball into me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. One into your heart center of the chest, but just above your physical heart. One into the front and one into the back. And that the more awareness you bring to that heart center, the more your awareness of the inherent pathway between the cosmic and you is strengthened. So the more awareness you bring there, the more comfortable you are with the direct knowing that you are individual and cosmic at the same time.
Okay.
Does that make sense in theory?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're not doing sound. So each one will be like a different method of getting to the heart.
Okay.
So this one is just a visualization exercise. And let's just try it for 3 minutes.
Sounds good.
Do your little visualization coming out. Third principle, vibration, will be the first time that I read from the book because there's the most fascinating description of the spectrum of vibration using the example of a top spinning. Let us suppose the object is moving slowly. It may be seen readily, but no sound of its movement reaches the ear. The speed is gradually increased. In a few moments, its movement becomes so rapid that a deep growl or low note may be heard. Then, as the rate is increased, the note rises 1 in the musical scale. Then, the motion being still further increased, the next highest note is distinguished. Then, one after another, all the notes of the musical scale appear, rising higher and higher as the motion is increased. Finally, when the motions have reached a certain rate, the final note perceptible to human ears is reached, and the shrill, piercing shriek dies away, and silence follows. No sound is heard from the revolving object, the rate of motion being so high that the human ear cannot register the vibrations. Then comes the perception of rising degrees of heat. Then, after quite a time, the eye catches a glimpse of the object becoming a dull, dark, reddish color. As the rate increases, the red becomes brighter. Then, as the speed is increased, the red melts into an orange. Then the orange melts into a yellow. Then follow successively the shades of green, blue, indigo, and finally violet, as the rate of speed increases. Then the violet shades away, and all color disappears, the human eye not being able to register them. But there are invisible rays emanating from the revolving object, the rays that are used in photographing and other subtle rays of light. Then begin to manifest the peculiar rays known as the X-rays, etc., as the constitution of the object changes. Electricity and magnetism are emitted when the appropriate rate of vibration is attained. When the object reaches a certain rate of vibration, its molecules disintegrate and resolve themselves into the original elements or atoms. Then the atoms, following the principle of vibration, are separated into the countless corpuscles of which they are composed. And finally, even those corpuscles disappear, and the object may be said to be composed of the ethereal substance. Science does not dare to follow the illustration further, but the Hermetists teach that if the vibrations be continually increased, the object would mount up the successive states of manifestation and would in turn manifest the various mental stages, and then on spiritward, until it would finally re-enter the all, which is absolute spirit.
Jeez.
Cool, right?
It's really cool. Yeah. Like, even before it got into the hermetic aspect of it, like, that is so wild to think that, like, all of that does happen from something spinning faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the principle of vibration applied to the task of attaining Christ consciousness, or being more like Jesus, to use a less New Agey phrase, is that, and just remember that the Kybalion laws are arranged in a certain order because they develop on each other. Mm-hmm. So now, knowing the principle of the all, and knowing the principle of the planes of correspondence, now adding the principle of vibration. Well, in the principle of the all, we talked about the fact that creation is a meditative or mental or imaginative act. So now that we have approached the principle of vibration, we are invited to notice that by our thoughts, by our imagination, we determine the rate of vibration at which we are, the rate of vibration that we occupy. Mm-hmm. And because consciousness is fundamental in the universe, and consciousness manifests as subtler planes, which manifest as grosser planes. Mm-hmm. When we think and imagine ourselves being tuned to the Christ vibration, even if we're not sure what that means, we just say, I am tuned to the Christ vibration. I ask to be tuned to the Christ vibration. Our thoughts, our imagination, which is far more fundamental than our bodies, mm-hmm. is triggering events in subtle planes of our reality that we're not consciously aware of that result in us being transformed in that image. An example from the Lord's Prayer. This is like the third line of the Lord's Prayer, I believe. Mm-hmm. Nehwe sabyanak aikana dawashamaya apa ba'arah. This is in the King James translation. Father on heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Mm-hmm. Nehwe refers to, and for full explanations of this, please see the Prayers of the Cosmos by Neil Douglas Klotz. Nehwe refers to a letting or allowing. Sabyanak refers to the cosmic will, as when Yeshua healed somebody, he would say Saba Ana, which was a reference to the fact that they were healed by being willing to be attuned to the cosmic will. So not I, the human, healed you, but I invited you to tune to the cosmic will, and you accepted that invitation. Saba Ana. Mm-hmm. So Sabyanak refers to that. Aikana is a word of immediacy or urgency, that this is happening right now. Nehwe Sabyanak Aikana. Debwashamaya. This is also the second word of the Lord's Prayer, and it's translated in heaven. But as Neil Douglas Klotz explains in the prologue to Revelations of the Aramaic Jesus, mm-hmm. the two basic poles of reality originally created by God are expansion, or heaven, and contraction, or earth. So that's the mystical meaning of heaven and earth, the principles of expansion and contraction. So Shemaya is heaven in Aramaic. Daba Shemaya then is like of the archetype of expansion moving in and out of everything. Daba Shemaya.
Okay.
Appa, simply and or to, or of, whichever of those simple words makes sense in this context. I can't remember.
Okay.
Read Neil Douglas Klotz. He's smarter than me.
Okay.
Ara'ah refers to earth or specificity or contraction. So here's why I'm saying all of that. Nehwe sabyanak aikana dawa shamaya apa ba'ara'ah means this. I invite myself to be tuned to the cosmic field. I invite my personal field to be tuned to the cosmic field so that that effect will resonate out into what is physical in me. So it's in Kybalion terms, may the all allow the most fundamental plane in me to be attuned to it so that the grosser manifestations or grosser planes in me may be tuned to that as well. So it's talking about using the power of the universal mind to control our individual mind, and then using the power of our individual mind to control what we are and what state we willingly choose to occupy. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So this meditation does not require a visualization or a sound or a specific technique or anything. Mm-hmm. It is only intention driven. It's just a petition. It is a statement that you make while bringing awareness to your chest. And the question is, first of all, you do have to have a couple of beliefs for this to be worth trying, which is that this guy Yeshua exists and is of a divine nature and is willing to answer prayers, mm-hmm. and is willing to be a link between you and the highest good, or the all. Mm-hmm. So if you're willing to entertain those precepts, then you just pray while bringing your attention to your spiritual heart. I ask to be attuned to the Christ vibration. I ask, please attune me to the Christ vibration. Mm-hmm. May I be attuned to the Christ vibration. Ask it, word it in whatever way, word it different ways. Let the words fall away and just ask with an intention. Do whatever is genuine to you, mm-hmm. but that's it. Okay. Jesus said, knock and it will be answered.
Right.
Part of the problem is ask and you shall receive. Yeah. Part of the problem is we're not quite sure what's the best thing that we could ask for. And this is a proposal. The best thing that we can ask for is to have our hearts attuned to the Christ vibration and for that to spill out and manifest in our lives. So we're just going to practice putting that intention into our chest for 3 minutes.
Sounds good.
We'll visualize out. Green dot in the heart center expands out as a sphere that surrounds our body, which allows us to project perfect Christ heart energy into the room. Fourth principle is polarity. The principle of polarity. One biblical example of the polarity directly follows the example that I just gave from the Lord's Prayer. So in the Lord's Prayer, it says, may the cosmic will transform my field reality, and may my field reality then transform my particle reality. And that idea that what's referred to as heaven represents in modern language field reality, and what is referred to as earth represents in modern language particle reality. Mm-hmm. That's proposed in two of Neil Douglas Klotz's book as well, Revelations of the Aramaic Jesus in reference to the Aramaic, and Desert Wisdom in reference to the Hebrew of Genesis. The first line of Genesis makes this point. Mm-hmm. So the first line of Genesis is Bereshit bara Elohim el Hashemaim ve'et haaretz. Shemaim and Aretz are the same as Shemaiah or Arah in Aramaic because the languages are so related. They use the same alphabet. That's how related they are. Mm-hmm. Shemaim referring to field reality, Aretz referring to particle reality. So yes, it means in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. But to offer my own, I'm just
alternative,
not my own. I'm just summarizing Neil Douglas Klotz's midrashic interpretation of Genesis 1:1. Uh-huh. Midrashic means for the ancient Hebrews, they believed that the 5 books of Moses were so divinely inspired that they could be read at different levels of analysis, and they were true at different levels of reality. Mm-hmm. Similar to how in modern science we'd say, well, this is the Newtonian classical level, this is the quantum mechanical level, this is the quantum field level, and this is the universal field or like M theory level. And we're describing realities at different levels of analysis. Mm-hmm. Similarly, because obviously we're the Western mind, this is where we got our ideas from in the first place.
Sure.
So a midrashic interpretation is an interpretation of the deeper levels of reality alluded to. And these are done by understanding the mystical meanings of the Hebrew characters, because each Hebrew letter meant something. So you can read it at the word level, at the root level, or at the letter level. So Neil Douglas Klotz does that work. Desert Wisdom and Genesis Meditations are 2 of his books that are relevant to this discussion. So what that first line is saying, according to Neil, is from the eternal state of beginningness, the ever-generating freshness of being, the original 2 archetypes, not in manifestation, but in principle, were generated. The principle of expansion, the field reality, the principle of contraction, the particle reality. So that is an example, even if you just read it on the surface, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Either way, this is an example, this is a biblical example of the polarity principle as explained in the Kybalion. That as soon as God manifests anything, God manifests two-ness. Two-ness has to exist in order for anything to come into being. And so...
Two-ness,
duality.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So God is the source of all of these laws, right? Mm-hmm. So God himself is not exactly... And by the way, I keep referring to God as him. I'm doing that on purpose, and I'll explain why in the 7th principle, just so you know.
Okay.
God himself is not subject to these laws, but everything that isn't God is subject to these laws. In other words, the Kybalion addresses all of the fundamental laws that apply to everything dualistic, because God created the laws, right? So if there was only one thing in the universe, there wouldn't be anything else. There's only God. There are no laws. Laws for what? To regulate what? To tune what to what? But as soon as anything's created, there's two-ness, there's duality. Now rules start to be created. So the fundamental rule is just the rule that duality exists, polarity, two opposites.
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
And that's why Genesis 1:1 reflects that principle, and that's why this is one of the laws in the Kybalion. As an aside, I wanted to bring up a conversation that you and I had the other day and just briefly summarize it here.
Sure.
I'm just saying that so I don't sound like an idiot phony for saying something I just said the other day. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Isn't it funny how people do that in conversation? They always go, oh, yeah, I was just telling so-and-so, and then they say it because they don't want to sound stupid for saying something they already said.
I totally do that. Yeah.
So we were talking about good and evil, and I was making the argument that good and evil are not poles. Well, the Kybalion does identify good and bad as one example of the polarity. Because like the polarity, you could say up and down, that's a polarity. Left and right, that's a polarity. Male and female, that's a polarity. You can't say camera and wall, that's a polarity. It's like, no, those aren't opposites. That doesn't really work. Those aren't even archetypal principles. Expansion and contraction, or heaven and earth in our kind of metaphorical language, those are opposites. They push and pull in and out, of course. But good and evil, not exactly. Because evil is our name for the distortion of something. We say that something perverted is evil, but what does perverted mean? It means something was good, but then it was changed in a harmful way.
Like redirected in a bad direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Not that it's fundamentally evil, but that it's doing something bad. So a lot of philosophers, Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now, for example, will refer to the goodness that is beyond good and evil, which is just another way of like, I mean, if you, let's say like right here, we have a little pyramid. I'm pointing at the shelf for those audio only. And we have a pyramid that's made of 3 cubic blocks. And the left of the bottom level is white, and the right of the bottom level is gray, and the top is white. The white represents good, and the gray represents evil. You could say good and evil are a duality, but there's a higher goodness that transcends them. Or you could consider the top white block and the secondary white block to be of one group and say goodness trumps evil. Evil is not the opposite of good. Both are valid descriptions. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I argue that good and evil are not a polarity because I think it's important for people to understand that they should not tolerate evil in themselves or their lives. And when people believe that good and evil is a fundamental duality, they're willing to do and say and think, maybe not do. They don't want to do evil things, but they're willing to think evil things. They're willing to feel evil things because they say, well, the whole universe is good and evil, and I am a microcosm of that macrocosm. Therefore, it's okay to have a little of this and a little of that, right?
Yeah.
And, it's just my thoughts and da-da-da. And all of that just invites chaos into your life that is completely unnecessary. If you are of the belief that good is the only fundamental thing, evil is temporary, evil is abnormal, and evil is unnecessary, then you will live a better life. And that's why I think the purpose of a belief is that when you act it out, it makes your life better rather than worse. So that's why I choose to hold the belief that good and evil are not a polarity, but there's a sense in which they are. Because if you're saying fundamental as in the dual level, the two level of reality, yeah, they're opposites. But if you're saying fundamental as in the singular level of reality, the all is not evil at all. And that's what's really fundamental. So I just think that's an interesting point on the principle of polarity.
It is, yeah.
So one of the poles is upper and lower. And this is interesting for the subject of the heart chakra because...
Sorry, is there like a finite amount of poles? Or is it just that you're just referring to any set of things that are opposites?
Any set of things that are opposites, and there's no limit to that.
Okay, cool.
Just like you could take a pie, and to any infinitesimally differentiated degree, you could slice it in 2 halves differently.
Yeah.
There's no way to measure. It's not like... I remember when we were like 5, you told me that a circle had 200 corners. Well,
it's true.
Yeah. I think you meant to say 360 corners because you had probably just learned that in like an early math class.
Yeah, that's how I try to defend that later, I think.
Oh, I didn't realize. I thought I was playing lawyer. I didn't realize that I had gotten that case from you.
Every time we've had this conversation, I bring up that point and you go, that makes no sense. You never said that. now you're giving me credit for it. So thanks. But I don't know what
I still forgot you deserved credit for it.
Yeah.
So, but it's not the case that that a circle has a finite amount of corners. So you can slice a pie in half in infinitely different ways. And in the same sense, the all can be alluded to by two poles. And like, I want to briefly mention on the subject of polarity, this is why Buddhists so value the concept of the yin and yang. It's not because they think duality is fundamental. It's because by observing duality, they become what is fundamental.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So Christians will sometimes look at Eastern philosophy and go, we think God is good, but they think God is half good, half evil. No, wrong. We talk about God boastfully and arrogantly, even if we're not quite sure what we mean by it. Do you believe in God? Yeah, me too. Like, oh yeah, we must be the same kind of guy. Like, we don't know. Yeah. We just throw the word around. And
complicated question. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then the brilliant Westerners like Jordan Peterson, they make an even bigger train wreck of the question than just answering it. And our whole thing about, because and so the whole idea that we can talk about God is dangerous, very dangerous. The Kybalion identifies itself as a text of religion, in that it is about attuning yourself to the highest good, a text about philosophy, in that it is an exploration of the fundamental truths, but not a text of metaphysics, as though it claims to describe the nature of what is meta, what is all, and not theology, in that it attempts to create theories that directly pertain to God himself. So based on that distinction, we can see why it's dangerous that we have all of these stupid surface level conversations about God. And that's why Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama?
Don't know.
Gama Buddha? That's why when he was asked, do you believe in God? What God should we worship? He offered basic life advice rather than directly answering the question, because he understood this was complicated. And so the Buddhist practice of observing poles is that the all observes the fundamental dualities, and nothing can observe the fundamental dualities in their perfect form but the original perspective, the causal perspective. And so by deeply meditating on push and pull, or in and out, or up and down, or left and right, or male and female, you are like, it's like if you could stand on the 50-yard line of a football field and stare at the line until both halves of the field came into perfect view. You do something like that with two opposing philosophical concepts, and you can have a mystical experience by doing that, and hence come to an experiential understanding of God rather than an intellectual understanding of God. So that's polarity to the Buddhists in a nutshell. So the heart chakra is in an interesting position of the chakra system because it is the center of the chakras that are referred to as the fundamental 7 chakras. And the 7 chakras are alluded to all over Revelations. Someone who's interested in that could look into Edgar Casey's insights on the book of Revelations. So it's not just an India thing that these 7 chakras are acknowledged, but they are the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the crown, and the third eye. So there are 3 chakras below the heart, and there are 3 chakras above the heart. And so the heart is the center in some sense. There's an ancient document from India called the 112 Ways of Shiva. Shiva was a messianic figure from ancient yoga and described methods by which one can attain the peak mystical experience. And one of the methods was the one I just described, contemplate 2 opposites. That's one of the methods in the ways of Shiva. Another one is, it says, this is number 16. It says, what are the words exactly? By practicing samyama on the heart, knowledge of the mind is attained. This is a modern translation of this, but the word for samyama basically means concentrating so wholeheartedly on something that you actually lose your personal sense of identity and yoke with it. So by bringing the full awareness into the heart, forgetting your individuality temporarily. You put it back on at the end. This is not like psychic suicide, but by setting yourself aside and going all the way into what I refer to as the green particle or the green dot, the center of the heart chakra. So going all the way in, that's samyama. By practicing samyama on the heart, the Sanskrit word for heart was hridaya. I might be saying that wrong. Hridaya, Hryada. Not that those are the Sanskrit characters, but that's 3 roots, and the roots mean give, take, and balance. So it refers to the heart, just like the Hebrews did. It refers to the heart as that which is the balance of 2 poles, that which can hold 2 poles in perfect harmony. And they're referring, of course, to the subtler heart, the spiritual heart. The word that it uses for mind there is chitta, and chitta refers more to something like universal consciousness than what we think of as mind. Think of mind with a capital M, not a mind, but mind itself, universal consciousness. And the word that it uses for knowledge is samvit, which is more like the full potent energy of knowledge or understanding. So this line is something more like when one brings their full awareness to the center of their heart center, the balance of opposites is attained such that they directly understand the universal consciousness. And that's one of the ways of Shiva.
Okay.
Another example of this from the ancient yoga texts is, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That's not one of the 112 ways. That's that's from the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. These are 2 fundamental texts of yoga. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I don't know how to pronounce it, and the Ways of Shiva. They both say the same thing about the heart, essentially. They just say it differently. That one was from the Yoga Sutras.
Nice.
The number 16 from the Shiva's Ways says instead, Blessed One, as senses are absorbed in the heart, reach the center of the lotus. As senses are absorbed in the heart, reach the center of the lotus. So just like the Hebrews have the concept of holy wisdom, the principle that can unify everything around a center, the Easterners have the concept of the lotus. It's the same thing. It's because the lotus flower is super symmetrical and it is a center that extends out into the beauty of diversity. So by going into the center of the lotus, that's a metaphor for experiencing the unity that is in the center of the diversity, the array.
Right. And like through all the petals, I feel like do a good job of being like a way to visualize the like layers that you have to go deeper and deeper within.
Yeah. Absolutely. The lotus flower, does it have like big petals around the outside and then smaller petals within? Is that what you mean? Because I don't actually know what a lotus flower looks like.
I think they're all pretty similarly sized, but you'd know it if you saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you think of them on like lily pads in Japan.
Right.
Yeah, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I can. Yeah. It is kind of layered, huh? which also alludes to the planes of correspondence.
Yeah.
And also like the nafsha ruha idea. You're an individual soul and you're the universal soul. And from a heart-centered perspective, you can become comfortable with that, what the Kybalion would call that paradox. And so the petal could say, yeah, I'm the flower, but I'm just a petal. Like I'm not acting like I'm the whole flower, but I also am an heir to the flower. Yeah, I'm the flower. Like I never have to be without all the other petals because we're the flower, but I'm just a petal. And say both and feel great, you know?
Yeah.
And okay, so those are 2 ideas related to the heart chakra from yoga. To go into the heart chakra is to experience the center around which diversity is expressed. To go into the heart chakra is to experience the unification of the opposites. And the meditation that I wanted to share for this one starts with a breathing exercise from Taoism, which is just to move energy up the torso and then down the torso using inhaling and exhaling. Super simple. But once we do that, we're going to feel the energy moving up our torso and down our torso, and then we're going to just center in the middle and rest on the heart chakra. So just sit upright. And I'll go ahead and just start the timer as I walk you through the breaths, because the breaths really are part of it for this one.
Okay.
So take a breath, let out all of your breath, and then take a breath where you start the movement. Like, you know, when you breathe, your stomach comes out or your chest comes out. Start the movement as low as you can, and then expand upwards. So, and then once you've inhaled all the way, hold it and feel as though the energy is stuck on the top of your head, and hold it. And then when you breathe out, feel as though the energy is descending back down to the bottom of your torso. So from beneath the navel, stomach, chest, head, full, big, big, big inhale, and you hold it, and you feel like the energy's moved from the bottom of your torso to the top. And it's stuck in the top. And then it rains down your torso as you exhale. So we'll do that a few more times. Now, the reason we're bringing this energy above the heart and then below the heart and then settling on the heart is the bottom, you say the lower and the upper chakras are like reflections of the human nature and the more divine nature in us. The lower chakras regulate survival and sex and emotion and things like that. And the upper, more things like language and connection with sages who have passed and the ability to see through reality as it appears to be. The heart is what mediates between the two. So we're human. There's divinity in us as well. We rain that divinity down on our humanness, and then we settle at the point that is like not underwater or above water, not human or divine, just right in the center. I'm going to do it a couple of times. You can just stay on the heart now, or you can do the breath a couple more times, whatever you're feeling. Let's just do it for another minute. All right, I'm going to do my visualization out. The fifth principle is so similar to the fourth that this will be just a couple minute explanation and then trying another meditation. It's the principle of rhythm. Rhythm and polarity are very simple. The way that I think about their differentiation is that polarity refers to the static nature of duality, whereas rhythm refers to the dynamic or kinetic nature of duality. That polarity is like, well, involution and evolution, they are both occurring simultaneously. It's that acknowledgement. Rhythm is the acknowledgement I think the acknowledgement that you made, which was that we involve and then evolve and then involve and then evolve. So when someone's like pedaling a bicycle, you could see the polarity and say both feet are simultaneously turning in circles. Mm-hmm. Or you could see the rhythm and go, the left is in front, then the right is in front, then the left is in front, then the right is in front. One of the really useful things about knowing this principle and gaining a greater mastery over your control of your moral life using this principle is that we tend to swing in one direction, then swing in the other. Like, for example, if we have a really good day, sometimes we will want to have a really bad day the next day. If we do something healthy, we might feel tempted to do something unhealthy because we earned it by doing something healthy. Mm-hmm. So the more the principle of rhythm, the tide in and out, the swinging of the pendulum is manifest in our habits unconsciously, the less control we have over what we're actually doing. But if we notice this principle, then when we are having a really good day and then the thought emerges, well, I can complain a little bit because I've been really positive all morning. We just notice it and we visualize ourselves just stopping the pendulum. Just stop it. Or something I like to do is visualize a track that steers that ball of the pendulum towards something positive instead. Like, oh, I was really positive all morning, so I should be able to do something kind of negative now. Instead going, no, how about I was so gentle all morning that I want to do something aggressive now. Like I want to do an aggressive workout because I've been very soft-spoken and kind today, and I want to express another nature that's also very positive now. So when you notice that swing, you can gain conscious control of it and you can stop yourself. And if you can do that, if you can stop the pendulum from swing from the positive to the negative, you can go swing positive, no, stay there. And you can just tie a chain around it and keep it there. Or you can direct it towards something better and gain a more conscious, will-driven control of your actions instead of letting them be unconscious.
Sure. So then it's like you can redirect it towards a rhythm which both halves of would be good. Like that's what you're saying by like the gentle and aggressive thing. Like instead go into a rhythm where both sides are beneficial for you and both sides are pedaling you forward.
Or stop the pendulum, whichever one you want to do.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Whichever one you like.
Okay.
I like the other one feels more flowy to me. Like, oh, I'm going to direct it in a better direction rather than I'm going to stop the pendulum. Yeah. But either one, it's your mind. You have total control over it if you notice it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this one is, I meant to bring up the Yoga Sutra in this one. So it relates to it. The Hridaya, the word for spiritual heart in Sanskrit, give, take balance. So we're going to apply that principle to the way in which we move into the heart. So this time we're going to breathe into the heart center. And as we're going to inhale and exhale into the heart center. So here's what we'll do. And I want to give credit. This is not borrowed from a book, but it is inspired from Genesis Meditations, which I've referenced twice already in here by Neil Douglas Klotz. Mm-hmm. He applies it to an ancient method for experiencing the beginningness of time. So it's a different application. But what we're going to do is bring our attention to our heart center. And as we exhale, we're going to imagine our awareness pushing into our heart center. And as we inhale, we're going to imagine ourselves pulling into our heart center. So both of them move us into our heart center. Like when you're swimming, for example, you have to push your hands forward, which contributes to the swimming, and then pull your hands back, which contributes to the swimming. And both of them move you forward. So we're using the principle of polarity.
Well, this doesn't move you forward.
Yes, it does.
No, I mean, like this part doesn't move you forward. Putting your hands like this, that pushes you back.
Two reasons that it moves you forward. First, if you just pushed your hands back and then you just left them right here, it would affect your aerodynamics. So you point your hands forward in a way that makes you more aerodynamic, contributing to your movement forward. Mm-hmm. The second reason is that the motion, bringing your hands from front to back, puts your arms in the position to pull again. So in that sense, it moves you forward.
Yeah. this probably isn't a very important distinction, but I guess when I think of, like, yes, it's aerodynamic, but I think that's just minimizing moving backwards.
I don't
not
think that
moving
this is
forwards.
Yeah, I don't think this is nitpicking because it needs to make sense to you in order for the meditation to be beneficial.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of continuing to push on it a little bit because it's not visually working for me because if you move your hands forward like this, you are moving. You're not grabbing anything. You're pushing.
I have a solution, so you don't have to do this anymore because I have a solution.
Okay, cool.
For your exhale, aim at the heart, and for your inhale, pull into the heart. Your exhale, aim into the heart. So to use the swimming metaphor, you're aiming into the heart center, and in the inhale, you're pulling yourself into it. With the exhale, you're aiming directly at the heart center, and with the inhale, you're pulling yourself into it. The important thing is just that the exhale and the inhale both draw your attention deeper into the heart center.
Okay.
Does that one authentically work for you?
No, but I feel like I'm going to come up with something else in my head, maybe.
Do you want to share? Because if someone's listening to this, probably thinking the same thing you are. So what would actually work for you?
Something like a Bowflex, where, like, you're pulling something. You're like, you know how a Bowflex works, right?
Yeah.
Like you're pulling something into something up ahead of you, but then you would have to change the machine to be able. The machine would have to be like switched
no, that's
to
a really good one. So
yeah,
you do
back out again.
You do your push up, and then you get up off of your chair, and you switch the weights, and then you use a chain to tie the two handles together so they're still there. Mm-hmm. Then you put your hands up, you unlock the chain, and then you pull it. So just do that. This is getting way closer to stealing from Neil, but the one that he uses in Genesis meditations for moving back in time is a fishing pole. So maybe you like his better. I like the swimming one better personally, but the fishing pole is on the exhale, you cast the pole, and on the inhale, you pull it in so that it draws you in. Cast it, pull in. Cast it, pull in.
I do like that better. Yeah.
There you go. Use his.
Cool.
Yeah, use his.
All right.
So let's just try that for 3 minutes. And it's an example of using both sides of the pole to contribute towards the same objective.
Okay.
That's why it's in the polarity section. Number 6, causation. This principle is that everything that occurs is caused by something, which is caused by something, which is caused by something, etc., which is caused by the original, primal, first cause. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about this idea a lot as it pertains to blame. Mm-hmm. What we generally do when something goes awry is blame whoever or whatever in the situation best verifies our already held biases and ego. Like if you already want to be mad at your spouse and something goes wrong, you just say that it's your spouse's fault. If you're driving and you're late for work, like this gets really dark when intellectuals, people who are cynical and intellectually oriented, people like us, who are prone to have big opinions, have something go wrong and we attribute it to something massive. That's how like domestic terrorists are created.
Yeah.
And in general, whether you're blaming people or you're blaming systems, you're always attributing blame that you are not remotely fit to calculate. Like you have no idea to say that happened because of that.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins, in his Netflix documentary, I Am Not Your Guru, was talking to a woman who blamed her ex-husband for all of the harm that he had caused her and their daughter, in front of her daughter, of course.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And Tony was like, you're not blaming him enough. Blame him for how fucking beautiful your daughter is and the fact that she exists in the first place. Blame him for, and he started listing all of the reasons that she could choose to be grateful to him, and said, what if you blamed him for everything good he did and everything bad he did at the same time? And he helped coach her toward a place of acceptance, or at least it looked like he did for the documentary. And if you do something like that with the original cause, the primal cause, the source of all, you can come to a greater place of acceptance where you don't ignore that something is a certain way, but you also don't finger point at it because you hold God responsible for all things. Mm-hmm. So, like, if I was late for work one time and you're my boss, and I've been working for you for 10 years and I'm late for work one time, there is no way in hell you're going to go off on me for that. It's going to be like, oh, dude, don't worry. You were on time actually 3,600 times. So one time late doesn't even count for anything. Mm-hmm. People who blame God for the suffering of the world are like people who have a reliable employee show up late and they pretend that was their first day. Like, this is it. This is it right here. You're late. Blah, 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 blah. Instead of seeing the big picture of what that employee is.
Yeah.
You look out at everything that works. Since we've been in here, the laws of physics have not betrayed us one time. But somehow if I spilled my coffee, I could go, oh, just my luck. Like, it's just my luck that none of these books fall off of the shelf while I'm sitting here. You know,
what a horrible phrase. What a horrible thing to say.
Just my luck. Yeah, that's the opposite of a mantra.
Yeah, with that attitude, yes, it is.
Yeah, that attitude probably is your luck.
Yeah.
So, if we consider everything to be an indirect result of the original cause, this is how this Kybalion principle applies to Christian spiritual maturation or spiritual maturation in general. Creation spiritual maturation, whatever. Maturation as it pertains to creation spirituality in particular, I suppose.
Okay.
Because the Buddhists might not think like in terms of there was an original cause. That might not fit as much in their worldview. But for us, we believe in a creator, so an original cause. For those of us who believe in a creator, it would be useful if we considered everything to be an indirect cause of that original cause, because then we would see everything in perspective all the time. And the bad things that happen would just be puny in the big picture all the time. And we would never blame individual people for stuff so much as we would just see an ocean of events occurring around us all the time and within us. So this meditation is just to bring our awareness to our heart, feeling a sense of gratitude for the original cause. So one mantra for this is, I am so grateful that anything exists at all. I can't believe I always forget to express gratitude for the reality that anything exists in the first place. Existence exists. Wow. And just feel awe and gratitude at that principle that anything exists in the first place. Because if we attribute everything to that and we're grateful for that, everything in our life will go better.
Okay. Yeah.
Any questions or comments on this one?
No, not at all. Sounds nice.
Dude.
I've said this before on other days, but I think it's so hard to even like imagine nothing, like not existence. When you try and think about it, I feel like there's like an electric fence there, like stopping you from getting to that thought. It's like, what if I didn't exist and nothing existed and there was nothing? But well, I couldn't even begin to observe that. It doesn't make any sense to even think about it. But yeah, I feel like a bzz almost. And it's so strange because people will say that like they believe and hope that there's nothing, that like they will not exist eventually. And
no,
to me,
they don't. No, they don't.
They say that
what they hope is that they'll get away with all the rotten things they've thought, said, and done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Yeah.
I think it'll just be a clean slate at the end of this.
Yeah. I think nobody saw that, right? Nobody saw that.
Nobody saw that, right? Exactly. When you do some foul act, when you like poop your pants, and then you go, hopefully there's no consciousness around me.
Hopefully nothing exists.
Right.
Yeah, but people will say that, and it's like, that's fucking nuts. I can't even imagine I can't even imagine not existing.
Right.
I think I'm just going to always exist.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Reincarnation, karma, etc. Okay, seventh principle is the principle of gender. And there's 2 chapters on this in the Kybalion. One is called gender, one is called mental gender. And I'm just going to do mental gender because it is so... The principle of gender is so similar to the principle of polarity, which was already so similar to the principle of rhythm, that the only manifestation of gender expressed in the Kybalion that I find worth noting in a summary like this, call it a summary, you could have read the book by now, but is mental gender. And this gets to why I said earlier that I was referencing God as masculine. That is because when I was referencing God, I was referring to the original conscious cause, the original will that triggered everything. And that is expressed as a masculine principle in the Kybalion. So what they mean by mental gender is like, they say, they first point out that in modern psychology, we have mental gender, as in the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain are associated with certain kinds of thinking. And that's a description of mental gender. But the Kybalion says that that is a far less advanced understanding of really fundamental or really archetypal or really subtle mental gender. And that at the subtlest level, mental gender is that the masculine mental principle is the principle of conscious will that is active. And the feminine principle is unconscious or passive. So the original cause, it's just like, why the symbolism that first a genderless human was created, right? The first creation story in Genesis is man and woman, he created them, and that's Adam. And it's like, is Adam a hermaphrodite? Like, how is this working? And then the second story, it's, Adam is created first, and then Eve second. Because they're...
Sorry. First story and second story? There's 2 different...
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, there's 2 creation stories in the first chapter of Genesis.
Really?
And then another one in Psalms for that record, but for the record. But okay. Yeah, it seems to say... Well, okay, there is 2 creation stories, but I might be wrong about the fact that they both describe the creation of Adam and Eve. Are you able to fact check me on this, Evan? Because Evan is LDS, and they actually read the Bible.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah. So what is the question?
The question was, he wasn't listening because he was reading the Bible instead. Mm-hmm. The question was, are there 2 creation stories in the first chapter of Genesis that describe the creation of Adam and Eve? But I think it's actually, in the beginning, it says, man and woman, he created them. And it references them being named Adam. And then later it describes the feminine being taken from Adam. Not exactly 2 stories, but like a continuation of the same story.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember exactly how it is.
Yeah, he said that he remembers, and I'm dead on correct.
Cool.
So that's what he said.
You guys are really smart.
I know, dude. Especially me. And so because they're both true in a sense, it's true that the divine is equal parts masculine and feminine. It's also true that the aspect of the divine that is the initiative or the giving is the masculine aspect. And then the receiving, the unconscious, the being created is more the feminine aspect of God. So this is why we naturally, because of our unconscious understanding of these archetypal patterns, refer to God as masculine typically, but refer to earth as feminine. So there are people who, in an effort to be politically correct, will refer to God as goddess because they're going out of their way to try to say the opposite of what they're supposed to because they're trying to be fair and right.
Right.
But those people will never refer to the planet Earth as a man because it just sounds dumb. Because the Earth is clearly so diverse.
Yeah.
And the feminine is the diversity. It's like the men do construction more, women do decorating more. It's like men can build a house, but when you go to a house that a woman doesn't live in, it's ugly and sad. So they can build a house, but they can't make it a home. They can't make it worth occupying. They can't put the beauty and the order in it. It's just kind of an ugly order structure. Speaking in generalities, obviously, but
Yeah.
the feminine is what makes a house worth occupying, what makes it beautiful, what makes it like a home. And unity is symbolized by the masculine, diversity is symbolized by the feminine, order is symbolized by the masculine, chaos symbolized by the feminine. The masculine can exist on its own accord in some sense that the feminine can't, but it wouldn't want to without the feminine. So it's not that one's more important than the other, but there is an initiator and a receiver, a giver and a getter. There's this dynamic here. So this might be what Yeshua was alluding to when he said in the book of Thomas that he would make Mary male so that she could enter the kingdom of heaven. Was like he is going to teach her how to embody the fundamental masculine archetype, because that is how to be fully integrated with what is causal in the universe. Now, the fact that the masculine principle, according to Kybalion, represents conscious choice and the feminine principle represents unconscious choice doesn't mean that men do what they're doing because they know what they're doing and women do what they're doing and they don't know what they're doing. But if there was some way to design a study, I would bet money that women are more likely to not know why they're making the choice that they're making. Whereas if you just ask a person right in the middle of making a choice, why are you making this choice? The likelihood that they can just extrapolate out a direct explanation of why they're making it
Right.
versus they're just making it from this intuitive place that bubbles up from within, I do think that dynamic would play out. Like, not
Seems probable. Yeah.
not 100-0, but maybe 60-40.
Yeah.
And so that is this principle. And yeah, so the exercise here is just to use the attention to be the heavenly father, to be the masculine archetype, is to be able to direct the attention just as a matter of choice. Not even to have any reason to direct the attention. Because when we think we're doing something for a reason, we're not even always doing it for the reason that we think we are. We say a reason on the surface, maybe that's not even it. But you know that you're free if you can do something just because you said so. Like, you do something just to do it. That's an expression of raw free will. And so the final meditation that we're doing, and this is the end of the episode, is just to spend 3 minutes putting the attention on the heart just as a matter of choice, not with any trick to make it easier or with any intention or whatever, but just putting the attention there.
Just going to man up and meditate.
Just meditate yourself up by your bootstraps. All right, 3 minutes. That is my presentation on the principles of the Kybalion used for Christian spiritual development. For someone who wants to do a deeper dive on this, here's what I recommend. For 21 days, read one chapter of the book of John each day. It's a 21 chapter book. And of the 4 gospels, it's the heart gospel for sure. And then study one of the 7 hermetic principles. So you'll go through the 7 hermetic principles 3 times in that 21 days. And you go through the book of John in that 21 days. Let your devotion be aimed at Yeshua and the God that Yeshua demonstrates the nature of. But use the hermetic principles to assist you in realizing or actualizing or concretizing that devotion into the way you actually live your life, into your state of consciousness. And I think that could be a really transformative 3 weeks. And then, so you read the Kybalion to get the law down. Then you read the book of John, your chapter, to know what to direct your devotion at, assisted by those laws. Mm-hmm. And then do whatever heart centering exercise works best for you. That's a 15-minute practice. Read, meditate, and do that every morning for 3 weeks.
Sounds good. And do you think that any translation in particular would be best?
Yes, the Passion Translation, because it's the most lovey-dovey poetic translation. I'm reading the King James right now because I just like the quaint classicness of it. But the Passion Translation refers to the Aramaic Peshitta version of the New Testament and the typical Greek version of the New Testament. And it is like an additional richness of poetic quality, and it wasn't written for accuracy, it was written for beauty. And when being written for beauty means being written for symmetry in a deep way that can even be more accurate technically than being written for accuracy. So the guy Brian something who translated it, he did something really incredible. He tried to write the New Testament as art rather than writing it as, this is the most technical definition of the word. He's like, I want this to be written in a way that it causes the love of God to bubble out from your heart. So I don't recommend it for all purposes, but for the purposes of meditating on the heart energy of the book of John, it's the way to go.
Cool. I think of the meditations, I think I liked the asking one best, and that would be the one I'd be most likely to pursue next. But maybe if I went back through them again, I would change my mind on that. But I thought that was cool.
I've been doing that one pretty much every morning,
nice.
Combined with something else that's more convoluted. But that's my favorite too.
I really like the simplicity of that. Like, I believe that could work,
right?
And it seems like a simple way to work,
right?
Yeah.
Because if any of them are possible, it's like, well, can I just ask for it? Like, do I have to like use the right?
Yeah, you should be able to.
For it?
Yeah.
Like, hey, if you want to get something from your dad who really loves you and wants to provide for you, you do it in this way and that way and this way and that way. It's like, well, why don't I just ask him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to trick him. You don't have to take it.
Right.
Yeah.
That it reminds me of that Yeshua line. Some people try to sneak over the gate and, but you have to just go through the door. I don't remember exactly how he said it, but that reminds me of that. Like, using the right technique can sometimes be like trying to sneak over the gate to God, and just asking God for what you want is more like just walking straight through the gate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one too.
Cool. I think I'm good.
Night's cool.